The mirror in front of me was a traitor, reflecting every doubt I'd tried to bury. I sat in the worn leather chair, the hum of clippers vibrating through the barbershop, and wondered if I'd made a mistake walking into this place. Just a haircut, Elias, I told myself. But the man behind me, his hands steady and sure, was already unraveling something I hadn't expected. Javier's fingers brushed my neck as he adjusted the cape, sending a shiver down my spine that I prayed he didn't notice. The barbershop, nestled in the heart of Portland's eclectic Hawthorne district, was a cacophony of life, snippets of conversation, the clink of scissors, and the faint rhythm of jazz spilling from a speaker in the corner. It was the kind of place where strangers became friends over a quick fade or a hot towel shave, but I wasn't here for camaraderie. I was here because my best friend, Lena, had insisted I stop hiding behind my overgrown hair and get out there, whatever that meant. "You want a clean fade or something bolder?" Javier asked, his voice smooth like the whiskey I wished I'd had the courage to drink before coming here. His eyes met mine in the mirror, dark and searching, and for a moment, I forgot how to speak. He was maybe 30, with a sharp jawline and a presence that filled the room, like he belonged everywhere and nowhere all at once. Clean fade, I guess," I mumbled, my cheeks burning. I wasn't good at this, talking to people, let alone someone like Javier, who seemed to carry the confidence I'd spent years chasing. I'd grown up in a small Oregon town where being openly gay wasn't exactly a parade, and even now, at 28, living in a city that waved pride flags like they were oxygen, I felt like an imposter. Javier smirked, tilting his head as he studied me. "You guess? Man, you gotta own it. This is your moment." He spun the chair slightly, his hands moving with a precision that made my pulse quicken. "Let's make you look like you mean business." I laughed, a nervous sound that betrayed me. "Business? I'm just a graphic designer who spends most of his time arguing with Photoshop." "Art, huh?" Javier's eyes lit up, and he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear as he started clipping. "That's cool. You draw what's in here." He tapped his chest lightly, and I swear my heart stuttered. What did I want from this moment? I hadn't come here expecting to feel anything, let alone the pull of something deeper. But as Javier worked, his hands steady and his voice weaving stories about his life, growing up in a tight-knit Puerto Rican family, moving to Portland to chase a dream of owning his own shop, I felt the walls I'd built start to crack. He talked about his abuela's cooking, the way she'd sneak him extra flan when his cousins weren't looking, and I found myself sharing bits of my own life. The small-town library where I'd escape into books, the way I'd always felt like I was waiting for something, or someone, to make sense of it all. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" Javier asked suddenly, his tone shifting as he swapped the clippers for scissors. The question caught me off guard, like he'd seen straight through me. What was I running from? The expectations of a family who still asked if I'd found a nice girl yet. The fear that I'd never be enough for someone like Javier, who seemed to have the world figured out. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, all the time." He paused, his hands still, and our eyes met again in the mirror. There was something raw there, a flicker of vulnerability in his gaze that made me wonder what he was running from. "Me too," he said softly, and the air between us shifted, heavy with unspoken truths. The shop was closing, the last patrons trickling out, but Javier didn't rush me. He took his time, sculpting my hair with a care that felt almost intimate. When he finally spun the chair to face me, he grinned, holding up a small mirror. "What do you think, Elias? Ready to take on the world?" I barely recognized the man staring back at me, sharper, bolder, like I'd shed a layer of myself I hadn't known I was carrying. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant more than the haircut. "You sticking around town tonight?" Javier asked, wiping his hands on a towel. There was a challenge in his voice, a dare I wasn't sure I could meet. What would happen if I said yes? Could a simple trip to the barbershop really change everything? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Yeah, I think I am." The street outside Javier's barbershop glowed under the neon signs of Hawthorne's bars and cafes, a kaleidoscope of life that felt both thrilling and terrifying. I stood on the sidewalk, my new haircut making me feel exposed, like the world could see every thought I'd tried to hide. Javier had invited me to grab a drink at a nearby dive bar, and against every instinct screaming at me to run home to my safe, quiet apartment, I'd said yes. Why had I agreed? What was it about Javier that made me want to step out of the shadows I'd lived in for so long? As we walked, his shoulder brushing mine, I felt the weight of that question pressing against my chest. The bar, a cozy hole in the wall called the Rusty Anchor, smelled of stale beer and possibility. Dim lights cast shadows over wooden booths, and a jukebox played a soulful tune that seemed to hum in time with my heartbeat. Javier ordered us whiskeys, his ease with the bartender suggesting he was a regular. To new beginnings, he toasted, clinking his glass against mine, and I wondered if he meant the haircut or something more. "So, Elias," he said, leaning back in the booth, his eyes glinting with curiosity. "What's your story? You don't strike me as the type to just wander into my shop on a whim." I laughed, sipping the whiskey to buy time. How much could I tell him? That I'd spent years feeling like I was living someone else's life? That I'd dated men in secret, always pulling back when things got too real? I don't know, I admitted. Lena, my friend, she's always pushing me to, I guess, live louder. I'm not good at that. Javier's smile softened, and he leaned closer, his voice low. You don't have to be loud to be seen. Sometimes it's the quiet ones who have the most to say. What did I want to say? The whiskey loosened my tongue, and I found myself talking about my childhood, hiding comic books under my bed so my dad wouldn't call them girly, the way I dreamed of escaping to a city where I could be myself. Javier listened, really listened, his eyes never leaving mine. He shared his own story in return. Coming out to his family at 18, the way his father had walked out of the room without a word, the years it took to rebuild that bond. It's not easy, he said, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. Being who you are when the world wants you to be someone else. But you keep going, you know? You find people who see you. Was he seeing me? The thought made my heart race, but doubt crept in. Javier was magnetic, the kind of person who could have anyone. Why would he be interested in me? A guy who could barely hold a conversation without overthinking every word. As the night wore on, the bar filled with laughter and clinking glasses, but it felt like we were in our own world. Javier's hand brushed mine on the table, lingering just long enough to send heat through my veins. You ever take a chance, Elias? He asked, his voice a mix of challenge and invitation. Like, really take one. What would it mean to take a chance? To let myself feel the pull I'd been fighting since the moment I sat in his chair? I looked at him, his eyes warm and steady, and something inside me shifted. I'm here, aren't I? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He grinned, a spark of mischief in his expression. That's a start. Come on, let's get out of here. We stepped into the cool night air, the city alive around us. Javier's apartment was just a few blocks away, he said, and before I could overthink it, I was following him, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the quiet streets. What was I walking toward? A night of reckless abandon, or something that could change me forever? Javier's apartment was a reflection of him, warm, eclectic, and unapologetically alive. Exposed brick walls were lined with vinyl records and framed photos of his family, their smiles frozen in moments of joy. A soft glow from string lights draped across the room made everything feel intimate, like we'd stepped into a secret world. I stood by the door, my heart hammering, as Javier kicked off his shoes and gestured for me to sit on the worn leather couch. Why was I here? What did I hope to find in this moment? With a man who felt both familiar and dangerously new. I sank into the couch, clutching a glass of water he'd handed me, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. You okay? Javier asked, sitting beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it, like he was testing the waters. Yeah, I lied, then caught myself. No, I don't know. This is a lot. I gestured vaguely, as if that could explain the storm inside me. I wasn't used to this, being in someone's space, feeling the weight of their attention. I'd spent so long keeping people at arm's length, afraid of what it meant to let them in. Javier tilted his head, studying me. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Elias. We can just talk. Or listen to music. I've got a killer vinyl collection. He grinned, but his eyes were serious, searching mine for permission to keep going. What did I want? To run back to my safe, predictable life, or to lean into the unknown? I took a deep breath, the scent of his cologne grounding me. Tell me something real, I said, surprising myself. Something you don't tell everyone. He laughed, a soft, surprised sound, and leaned back, his arm brushing mine. Okay, real. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a dancer. Not just any dancer. Broadway, the whole deal. I'd sneak into my sister's dance classes, mimic her moves in the mirror when no one was home. But my dad, he said it wasn't for boys like me. The vulnerability in his voice hit me like a wave. I pictured a younger Javier, full of dreams, stifled by a world that didn't understand. What changed? I asked. I found other ways to move, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. Cutting hair, it's like a dance. You feel the rhythm, the flow. You make something beautiful out of chaos. He paused, then added, kind of like this moment, right now. My breath caught. Was this moment beautiful, or was it chaos? Maybe it was both. I told him about my own dreams, how I'd wanted to be a comic book artist, but settled for graphic design because it was practical. How I'd always felt like I was living half a life, afraid to claim the parts of myself that didn't fit. Javier listened, his hand resting on the couch between us, inches from mine. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached for a record, sliding it onto the player. The soft crackle of vinyl filled the room, followed by a soulful melody that seemed to wrap around us. Dance with me, he said, standing and holding out his hand. What would it mean to say yes? To let myself be seen, not just by Javier, but by myself? I took his hand, my fingers trembling, and he pulled me close, guiding me into a slow, swaying rhythm. His touch was steady, grounding, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The music wove around us, a cocoon of sound that made the world outside Javier's apartment feel like a distant memory. His hand rested on my waist, warm and sure, as we swayed to the rhythm of a song I didn't recognize but felt in my bones. My heart pounded, not just from the closeness, but from the realization that I was letting myself fall into this moment, into him. What was I afraid of? Losing control, or finding something I couldn't walk away from? As Javier's eyes met mine, soft and searching, I knew the answer was both. You're thinking too much, he murmured, his voice a low hum against the music. I can see it in your eyes. Just be here, Elias. Easier said than done. My life had been a series of careful steps, each one calculated to avoid rejection, judgment, or pain. But here, in this dimly lit room, with Javier's breath warm against my cheek, those steps felt like chains. I'm trying, I said, my voice cracking. I'm not good at this. This? He raised an eyebrow, his lips curving into a teasing smile. Dancing? Or something else? I laughed, the sound easing the tension in my chest. All of it. You. This. I gestured to the space between us, the air thick with unspoken possibilities. I don't know how to just let go. Javier's hand tightened on mine, grounding me. Then let me show you, he said, and before I could protest, he spun me gently, pulling me back into his arms with a grace that made my breath catch. See? Not so hard. We moved together, the music guiding us, and for a moment, I forgot to be afraid. I told him about the first time I'd admitted to myself I was gay, whispering it to my reflection in a foggy bathroom mirror at 16, terrified of what it meant. He shared how he'd found solace in the barbershop, a place where he could create without judgment, where every cut was a small act of defiance against a world that tried to box him in. As the song ended, Javier didn't let go. Instead, he led me back to the couch, our hands still linked. You're not what I expected, he said, his voice soft but intense. When you walked into my shop, I thought you were just another guy looking for a quick trim. But there's something about you, Elias. Something real. What did he see in me? The question burned, but I didn't ask it. Instead, I leaned closer, my heart racing as I said, You're not what I expected either. The words felt like a confession, raw and unguarded. The air between us crackled, and before I could second-guess myself, Javier's lips were on mine, soft and urgent. The kiss was a question and an answer, a collision of fear and want that left me dizzy. When we pulled back, his eyes searched mine, waiting for permission to keep going. What did I want? To run or to stay? I chose to stay, letting him lead me to his bedroom, the world outside fading as we stepped into something new, something terrifyingly beautiful. Javier's bedroom was a sanctuary of warmth, with soft light spilling from a bedside lamp and a quilt that looked like it carried stories of its own. As I lay beside him, the weight of what had just happened settled over me like a tide. This wasn't just a moment. It was a turning point, one I hadn't seen coming when I walked into his barbershop hours earlier. What did it mean to be here, in his bed, with a man who saw parts of me I'd barely acknowledged myself? Was this love, or just a fleeting spark? My mind raced, but Javier's steady breathing beside me grounded me, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. "You're doing it again," he said, his voice sleepy but amused. He propped himself up on one elbow, his eyes tracing my face. "Thinking too much." I laughed, the sound muffled against the pillow. "Guilty. I didn't expect this. Any of it." He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek. "Good things happen when you don't expect them. You just gotta let them." But could I? The weight of my past, of years spent hiding, of relationships that never went anywhere because I was too afraid to commit, pressed against me. Javier was different, though. He was open, unapologetic, and unafraid to chase what he wanted. It made me want to be brave, too. We talked for hours, our voices soft in the dark. He told me about the barbershop, how it was more than a business. It was a community, a place where people could be themselves. I shared my fears of never living up to my own potential, of staying stuck in a life that felt safe but small. With every word, I felt the distance between us shrink, like we were building something together, word by word. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Javier smiled, his hand finding mine under the quilt. "We figure it out. Together. If you want." Did I want that? The thought was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time, I felt like I could choose something real, something worth fighting for. "I want," I said, and the words felt like a promise. As dawn crept through the window, painting the room in soft pinks and golds, I realized I wasn't the same person who'd walked into the barbershop. Javier had seen me, really seen me, and in his gaze, I'd found the courage to see myself. Morning light spilled across Javier's apartment, turning the chaos of last night into something soft and real. We sat at his small kitchen table, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs, the silence between us comfortable but charged. I'd spent the night in his bed, but it wasn't just about that. It was about the connection we'd forged, the way he'd made me feel seen in a way I'd never known. What did it mean to build something with someone like Javier? Could I trust this feeling, or was it just the high of a single night? As he smiled at me over his coffee, I wanted to believe it was more. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "you gonna come back to the shop for another cut, or is this a one-time thing?" His tone was light, but his eyes were serious, searching for an answer I wasn't sure I had. I laughed, buying time. "You're already trying to book my next appointment?" "Nah," he said, leaning forward. "I'm trying to figure out if you're gonna disappear on me, or if you're ready to stick around." The question hit me hard. I'd spent so long running, from relationships, from myself. That staying felt like a foreign concept. But Javier wasn't asking for a promise. He was asking for a chance. "I don't want to disappear," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm scared." He nodded, like he'd expected that. "Scared is okay. Scared means you care. Just don't let it stop you." We spent the day together, wandering Portland streets, sharing stories and silences. He took me to his favorite food cart, where we ate tacos under a canopy of fairy lights, and to a bookstore where he teased me for geeking out over graphic novels. Every moment felt like a step toward something bigger, something I couldn't name but wanted to hold on to. But doubt lingered. What if this was too fast, too intense? What if I wasn't ready for the kind of love Javier seemed to offer, one that demanded honesty, vulnerability, and courage? As we walked back to his apartment, his hand in mine, I realized I had to choose, step into this or walk away. A week later, I stood outside Javier's barbershop, my heart pounding as I watched him through the window, laughing with a customer. The memory of that night, of his touch, his voice, the way he'd made me feel alive, hadn't faded. But now, in the daylight, with the world moving around me, I had to decide what came next. What did love mean to me? Was it this, the messy, beautiful risk of opening my heart to someone who saw me, flaws and all? I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Javier looked up, his grin lighting up the room. Back already? That fade's still fresh, man. But his eyes said he knew this wasn't about a haircut. I'm not here for a trim, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves. I'm here for you. The shop fell quiet, the other barbers and customers glancing our way. Javier stepped out from behind his chair, closing the distance between us. You sure about that, Elias? He asked, his voice low, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes. I'm sure, I said, and I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't running. I was choosing him, choosing us, choosing the love I was meant to find. We stepped outside, the city buzzing around us, and he pulled me into a hug that felt like home. This is just the beginning, he whispered, and I knew he was right. The barbershop had been the start, but what we built together would be the story. As we walked hand in hand down Hawthorne, I realized that love wasn't about being fearless. It was about being brave enough to show up, to stay, to let someone see you. And in Javier, I'd found the person I wanted to be seen by, the love I was meant to find.